episode 145 of the podcast. In the first part, we're going to talk about how dogs don't like being tricked. Sometimes being sneaky about something is not going to make the dog any better. In the second part, we're going to talk about dopamine and classical conditioning and counter-conditioning and desensitization protocols. You're listening to the Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast. I'm Chrissy Newmeyer-Smith. I'm a certified professional groomer, a certified behavior consultant for canines, a certified professional dog trainer, and the owner of Happy Critters in Nashua, New Hampshire. And this, my friends and colleagues, is the podcast where grooming and training meet. No one likes being tricked, and our dogs don't either. Now, how can you know that? It's not like you can look into their head and see what they're thinking. And you're right, that's an assumption. But it's an assumption based on watching behavior and how it changes based on what we do. Now, many dogs become worse when we, as groomers, owners, vets, etc., try to be sneaky. When are we being sneaky? So here's an example that I hear a lot, and please think twice before you try doing this common piece of advice. It goes a little something like this. The dog has trouble for something, let's say nails, and the misguided advice is to try trimming just one nail while he's asleep. Yeah, so we're trying to do it while the dog is asleep. And you may be thinking, I've given that advice, or I've tried that, or maybe you're even thinking it's worked for me, so, what's wrong with that advice? And for some dogs, it may work, but for others, this backfires, and backfires in a big way. It will depend on why the dog is having a hard time with whatever it was that we were doing, or whatever it was that the dog has trouble with. If the dog was worried about being touched and handled and was having problems trusting us to not hurt them, then this will make it worse. Even if you chant, see, it's okay, it didn't hurt. Like, why isn't this any better? It didn't hurt him. Because it's not about pain. Sometimes the problem is about trust. And if you think about trust, we're trying to get something done that the dog is nervous about, and we want to help them feel comfortable with it and safe with it, not just get it done and have them figure out on their own that it doesn't hurt. Because it's not about pain. Lots of things scare us that did not hurt. Now imagine, if you will, that we're trying to teach a dog to hate something. Imagine we wanted them to hate something, to be vigilant, to be suspicious. And I know that sounds crazy because it's not something that we usually do. But let's run with this example for a moment because this is one of the ways that I talk to owners. And sometimes it can really enlighten us. What would we do if we wanted to teach a dog to hate having us touch their nails? What might we do? We might sneak up on them and do stuff that they've expressed that they're uncomfortable with. You might sneak up and do stuff and things fast and without warning. You might wait until they're asleep and startle them awake with the stuff and things that they worry about or hate. And that's very likely to make a dog suspicious of you, to make them even more paranoid about the stuff and things that you do. I want you to be thinking about that. If we wanted them to be really paranoid, what might we do? We might just keep going at it and doing it at random times and when no one was expecting it and just ta-da, I trimmed a nail, right? Now, as a human example, yeah, there are human examples of this. As a human example, I know someone who tried this with her 2-year-old son who's nervous about getting his hair trimmed. 2 years old. Oh my God, this little boy is like the cutest little guy. Such a cute guy. Well, now he's 3, but when he was 2, just went through a phase where he's like, don't touch my hair. You can brush it and you can touch it, but he thought that hair trimming was scary. Now, who knows where he got the idea? Don't know. Maybe it's just an assumption that you're coming at me with something and I don't want it around me. This new item. I don't like it. So anyway, they were trying to be sneaky. They would try to come over and pretend to snip with their fingers, like snip, snip, snip. This just made him more paranoid. Then they tried trimming a little bit when he was asleep. He woke up, which is always what happens when you try something when they're asleep. They wake up and was much more paranoid about it. It made him much worse. So there's a human example with a young human who actually has some English speaking skills, who is expressing, I'm nervous about the thing you're trying to do. So being sneaky isn't necessarily going to help anybody feel safe. So when we're looking at a dog who's having a problem with us doing something, we need to shift our focus from how can I get that done to what is it about that that's making them nervous? And how can I help them feel safe? How can I help them feel better about it? How can I help this dog, not just get it done? And also, like I said, if you think back, if we were to reverse engineer and try to teach a dog to hate nail trims, to hate it when we touch his feet, to be really paranoid about anybody near his feet, we might try to do a lot of stuff while they were asleep. So again, please, 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 please think twice before you try the I'm going to just quickly get it done while you're not looking, or quickly get it done while you're asleep. For some dogs, you might be able to get away with that. So let me give you an example. One of my dogs, years and years and years ago, ripped her dew claw running around out in the field. She didn't even notice it happen. But for a long time, she was extra nervous about that nail. And it wasn't a trust issue with me. It was just extra nervous about that nail. So we worked on it a lot. But really, if I was just trimming her nails, I would do the other 4, get to that dew claw, and just trim it. She didn't have any problems with trusting me, so it wasn't a trust issue. It was more like oh, thank God that's over. And those are the dogs who are like, oh, thank God that's over. Thank you for getting it done. Those are the dogs that may be okay with you trying to get it done and be sneaky. Another human example for when sneaky might be okay. I'm fine with looking at blood and I'm fine with needles. I just cannot look at that needle go in my arm. I kind of want to be distracted. So a distraction is okay, but I also want to know that there is a needle. You don't get to distract me and draw blood from me without telling me ahead of time. There's a consenting distraction. So if you can give me the heads up that you're going to do something that I find makes me nervous, then I don't mind being distracted. My human example again, if someone is drawing blood from me, I'm likely looking around the room like, oh, hey, is that a picture of your kid? That's awesome. Please distract me. What do you think of this weather? But it's not being sneaky. I know that this is happening. So for instance, my dog with the dew claw that she was really sensitive about for a long time after she ripped it, I was trimming the other nails. She knew it was coming, a nail trim is coming, and I can just quickly do that nail because she trusts me. She was just nervous about it. So there's a little bit of consent in there. It's different than being ambushed. It's different than being tricked. We can distract a little bit as long as the dog is still consenting, as long as the dog is still cooperating with us, calm, comfortable, and cooperative. As long as the dog is aware that we are going to do something, then it's not likely to backfire. So if I lifted up a dog's foot and I'm like, okay, I'm going to trim your nails, and meanwhile someone else is petting your head, I'm telling him I'm trimming his nails. Maybe he likes the distraction of someone else petting his head. Some dogs need somebody to help console them a little bit, but that's different than being sneaky or tricking them. Like, hey, why don't, while you're petting him, I try to, see, I got it done, it didn't hurt. That's an ambush. And we want to avoid ambushing our dogs because, like I said, a lot of dogs become worse, become really hypervigilant, become really suspicious of people, become really suspicious of the tool coming out, like, oh, that tool's out. Time to start looking at everybody because something's going to go wrong any minute now. So think about not tricking them. We can distract as long as they also know what is happening. Then a distraction is okay because there's some level of understanding that, oh, they're trying to do something. Maybe I need a little bit of a distraction. Just take my mind off of it. Like Chrissy when she's being a sissy about getting blood drawn. It's okay. I'm going to own it. I just can't watch the needle. I can't watch a needle with the vaccines either. I'm looking at everything else in the room and distracting myself. So sometimes distractions are okay, but they have to be informed that something is happening or it can totally backfire. If you're enjoying this podcast, please remember to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes and tell all of your friends. Let's talk about feeling good. So, when you feel content and relaxed, maybe it's that rare chance to sit back and relax and enjoy a cup of coffee. Or maybe it's a song that you like to sing, or maybe it's dancing. But think about things that you do to refresh and relax and to feel content. Here's another one. Maybe it's snacks. Nibbling on chocolate or snacking on something that you really like is another way to feel good. When are we going to talk about dogs? What the heck is going on here? When we feel good, often that's dopamine. And dopamine can drive our behavior. I looked for examples of dopamine in people. And I found this from Into Action Recovery. A lot of addiction problems and stuff, they talk about dopamine levels and reward-based behaviors. How does dopamine drive our behavior was the article that I got this from. For example, when you eat comforting food, your brain releases dopamine, which makes you feel good. Therefore, your brain assumes this is a reward and encourages you to repeat this behavior, even though the comforting food may not be the healthiest food choice for your body. Dopamine is associated with reinforcement. So that's the quote from intoactionrecovery.com and how does dopamine drive our behavior. I just thought it was a good example because I think we can relate to that. That feel good, like, it's a food thing. You're like, that feels so good. Comfort food, you know? Now, dopamine, when we're talking about dogs, this is part of counter conditioning and desensitization. When we start with a dog feeling good, we want to start with a dog who's in that, I'm munching on stuff and I'm feeling content. We want that feel good part, snacking and feeling dopamine. That's the first part. So feeling good is a brain that is flooded with dopamine. And then, counter conditioning and desensitization, then we gently and gradually expose the dog to the stuff and things that they found challenging. Now, keep in mind I'm saying gently and gradually after the food is presented, after the dog is already feeling good, because we're trying to change their mind about those feelings. We're trying to reprogram them to think this is paired with the good stuff. So some examples. This is when you might use a lick mat for a dog to lick something yummy and begin to feel good, and then turn on a Dremel for maybe 2 seconds. If you're doing it right, the dog doesn't respond to the Dremel. It should be about as interesting as watching paint dry. If we want a dog to feel good about the Dremel, we need to keep them feeling good that whole time. And this is at the heart of counter conditioning, feeling the opposite about a thing, and desensitization, being less sensitive to a thing. We're not asking the dog to do anything to earn the food. The food is something that comes first. We get them the food, or, well, in this case, it's usually food when we're doing counter conditioning and desensitization. So the food is there. Maybe it's peanut butter on a lick mat. As an example, we want them to be in the zone where they're like, I'm licking something good, la da 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 da, I'm having a good day. Everything's good, everything's coming up wonderful. And then we start to gently and gradually expose them to something that they found challenging so that their brain can rewire and think, Dremels, yeah. I had a Dremel nearby when last time I was eating peanut butter, And I know that's an oversimplification, but the brain that is flooded with dopamine, the brain that is really relaxed and content can learn how to deal with something like that differently than a dog who is stressed. The brain that is stressed, the brain that's souped up on adrenaline. So When we look at classical conditioning, counter conditioning, and desensitization, when we look at those things, what we're trying to do is set the mood and then introduce something that the dog thought was challenging in that mood, in that good zone, and reintroduce this thing. It is not just going ahead and getting it done and hoping that they relax, or adding food after they're stressed. Adding food after they are stressed is not counter conditioning and desensitization. It might be a bribe, it might be a lure, it might be attempts at reward, at positive reinforcement. But for true counter conditioning and desensitization, the food is something we're doing ahead of time. Now, I'm going to say it's not really something that you can casually do in a grooming setting. If you do, it's because you already know this dog has a problem and you are setting up this specific training so that we have the food there available, and we're just going to gradually, gently see what the dog can handle and keep them in that zone where they are not the slightest bit worried, and let go of the idea of getting a nail trimmed, a clipper near an area, right? Letting go of that and just work on building the dog's confidence with what we have. So it's not something that we're usually going to add into grooming. But anytime someone says that food is only for positive reinforcement, well, this is not positive reinforcement. This is part of classical conditioning. Positive reinforcement is part of operant conditioning, where the dog is only getting food because of an action the dog does, operates the behavior, right? The dog operates the behavior, gets the food reward for it, or gets a punishment for the behavior they're doing. But the behavior drives whatever reward or punishment happens after it. Operant conditioning. Classical conditioning is just a simple pairing of things. This is a good thing paired with another thing. Now, hopefully both things are paired as good things. So think about when the brain is filled with dopamine. This is a chemical reaction in their body. This isn't just a matter of adding food. This is, I want you to really enjoy and savor the thing that you're eating while I expose you to something that you previously have expressed made you nervous. Gently, gradually, not just go over and, well, let's put down some peanut butter and have him lick that while we wrestle him down for nails. And I know that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Because sometimes that's what's happening. Like, I don't know, we tried the peanut butter, but it didn't work. It's not because peanut butter doesn't work. It's the process wasn't quite done in the right order. So we need to think about, first, let's get the mood that we want. And we use that a lot using food. Get the mood that we want. Get that brain in that content, dopamine kind of, this is great, before we add the challenge. And adding the challenge at a point that this dog can handle, where the dog barely notices the thing, and then build from there. So again, not really something that's going to be really easy to use during grooming, but something that if we know a dog has a problem, we can start working on in our grooming shops if we want to add some training, or we can ask them to go to a trainer, or we can ask them to go home with some homework. But it's a different process than just adding food. This is a very specific process. And you know the process is working if the dog is becoming less sensitive to the challenging thing. If the dog is counter-conditioned, feeling different about and less sensitive to the thing that they used to be scared of. And that's how you would know. So you always have to circle back and look at the behavior and say, is the behavior telling us that this dog is improving? If you'd like more information, you can find me at Chrissy@happycritters.net, happycrittersdogtraining.com, or you can join the Facebook group, Creating Great Grooming Dogs podcast, or the Facebook page, Creating Great Grooming Dogs. I really look forward to hearing from you.